No, that's fame. Fame has a 15-minute half-life. Infamy lasts a little longer. Kind of like Lou Diamond and his aftershave. It lingers.
It's time to take an inside look at those that are taking their lives, their businesses, and their passions to the next level. Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond. Today on Thrive Loud, we have speaker, writer, and human rights activist. She founded and served as president of Live Action, a media and news nonprofit dedicated to ending abortion and inspiring a culture that respects all human life. Her new book, Fighting for Life, just came out in early May. She also hosts a very popular podcast show, The Lila Rose Show, which addresses topics like purpose, work, relationships, and health. Thrive Love listeners, if you're smart enough, you could figure it out. We have Lila Rose here with us today. Lila, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Lou?
I'm spectacular. We're here. It's early in the week. I just learned you've got a little 1-year-old, probably. You're working on fumes on sleep and energy and all that. So I appreciate you coming here today on Thrive Loud to connect with you and hear what's going on in your world. What I kind of want to do is do like the brief little rewind, not all the way to the womb or for the baby to the womb. I want to know specifically how this all became the gig that you focus on. You've been starting, you have an interesting career. I've looked through your bio and whatnot before, but our listeners don't know. Can you share a little bit about how this became your gig?
Sure. So I started my organization as a teenager. I'm 32 now. So that was over a decade and a half ago. And it was born out of a lot of, I guess, moments that inspired and convicted me. So I'm from California, from Northern California. I'm a rare one of 8 kids. So that's a little unusual. I know for a lot of folks today, we were not Catholic or Mormons growing up. My parents just loved kids. And I was the third oldest. So I had a lot of younger brothers and sisters. And I remember seeing the ultrasound pictures on the fridge growing up of my younger siblings and just thinking that was so cool. And then as I got older, I think I was, and I still am in many ways, that empath type. So things affected me deeply. And I think for a lot of us, when we find out about evil or suffering for the first time as a kid, that makes a big impression on us. And so as I was kind of becoming aware, getting into my adolescence of evil in the world, and thankfully I didn't experience evil done to me the way some people have in really difficult childhoods. In some ways, I had a very blessed childhood, but I became aware that there was injustice in the world. And this was, some little things, whether it was learning about famine in other countries and, catching the image on a TV commercial of children suffering through a famine, or finding out that some people were homeless and thinking about what an injustice that was. And I came across the issue of abortion as a kid. And this was through finding out there was this book, like a history book on it that my parents had. They didn't know that I had found it. It was one of their many books. They loved books. They had books everywhere in our house growing up. And I found this book that basically detailed abortion's legality from 1973 in the United States when it was the Supreme Court decision Roe v. Wade was decided. And it also showed images of fetal development and embryonic development. So you could see the humanity of the baby, even in the first trimester. And I think a lot of people don't really consider this, but by the end of the first trimester, you can see this beautiful child. You see all the internal organs are present. You can see arms, legs, torso, face has developed. It's incredible. And the book also showed images of children who'd been victims of abortion. So you could actually see these most common abortion procedures and how they harm their children, how they end up dismembering ultimately children in the womb, even in the first trimester. So really weighty, heavy stuff. But as I started to learn more about that, I was just really heartbroken over that. I hadn't really thought through the mantra of my body, my choice, or women's rights. I mean, most little kids, just when they learn about another person suffering or another human being hurt, their hearts are just, torn for them. And so as I learned about abortion, I saw the child. I didn't really think about it in terms of all these other political conversations. And then as I got older, as a young woman, I began to really tackle that. Like, is it really a woman's right to do this? And does it really help women? And should we really pit women against children? And I started to dive deeper into that. And I became convicted that this is actually against women. And, women's healthcare shouldn't include ending the life of a child. And so the more I studied that, the more I became passionate about wanting to advocate for children and for mothers, and to work to make people see the truth about abortion and reject it. And so that started live action for me as a young activist. It was kind of unusual. Silicon Valley is typically thought to be kind of politically left, not, abortion is typically thought in a conservative sense. I don't think it needs to be conservative or liberal. I think it should transcend political divides. Everybody can be pro human rights for the child. But that inspired me to start Live Action. And it was really just an educational group in my parents' living room. And then it just took off from there. And I could go on and on about all the crazy twists and turns in the journey. But it was just, started with this conviction and a heartache that I felt, and a desire to want to educate others and help save lives.
Lila, it's hard to hit this topic and not cover politics. And I say that and from a different angle than you think I'm going to go with this. It's like the reality is that it has become a dividing topic for now almost 50 years, or even longer than that, really, before any decision was made. And it becomes a political conversation that puts you on one side or the other. And that's actually what I want to ask you on this is, you made a good comment. You live in an area that, you're right, skews a little bit more liberal or left based on the Northern California, depending on which town you're living in or wherever you are. But we do recognize California could be chopped into two states of total differences. And that's actually something interesting you just brought up. This was something that affected you personally, and you had to take to it as you got older, and you started seeing that this was something that was topical and political, and the way that it is used and used against the parties of election and politics, and every 4 years or every 2 years, whatever it might be. And you take that as you matured and got older, as you saw how this was a political divide more than it might have been something about humanity.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I so appreciate getting into it, because I think people shy away from topics that can become political, but I like to go to the heart of the matter and say, why is this political to begin with? And when I started to see, as you just said, that there was this left-right, Republican, Democrat divide over abortion, and I started to look back at the history, because I ended up majoring in history in college. I fell in love with history. I felt like there was so much you can learn from history if you looked at it. And when I looked at the history of human rights abuses, I saw how they were politicized, and how typically the reason that they were perpetuated is because one political side, even if the people in that side weren't okay with the abuse, ended up covering for it. And so you look back in our history and you have institutionalized slavery, the worst kind of institutionalized racism. I mean, complete carnage of Blacks in this country in the 19th century and before. And unfortunately, it became a political divide at the time. But there were people, like especially a lot of the Quakers and other early abolitionists, other Blacks standing up, that were free to try to rescue others, who said, this is about human rights. This is about life or death for human beings, our brothers and sisters. And so I don't care what the politics are saying, or whether this makes me this way politically or this way politically. I'm going to fight for the lives of other people who are being unjustly harmed. And so as myself, looking at those examples and drawing inspiration from them, and just looking at the examples of people fighting for human rights throughout history. My heart as a young girl growing up in Silicon Valley was, I want to do something for justice. I think we all deep down want to do something meaningful with our lives. I think we're sensitive to injustice, and sometimes we think, do I even have a reason or a way that I can make a difference personally? But I felt strongly that if people were educated, whether they were left or right, Democrat or Republican, independent, whatever, and I don't even identify as one political label myself. I wish all parties, if anything, I might even say I'm independent. I wish all parties were pro-life, but I thought, if we can just educate people that on the humanity of the preborn child and present a different paradigm, that actually abortion is harmful to women, that it's not a positive development for women. And you look at the history of abortion in America, and a lot of the early advocates were men. They're actually white men who started the first political advocacy organizations for abortion in the mid 20th century. And the early feminists in this country were pro-life. They weren't even pro-abortion. And so looking at that, that inspired me to actually work even harder to educate on this most important issue, because I think it needs to transcend politics. And the more that people become educated, the more it can transcend politics and the political divide.
So I see you have a care for justice. This past year has been an interesting one. Obviously, amidst the pandemic, we had an absolute, we'll call it whichever way you want to call it, an injustice awakening of what was happening, from Black Lives Matter protests taking place to defunding police to fighting in certain cities, and obviously injustices to people. I don't think there's a person in the world that didn't see what happened in Minnesota and what that police officer did and said, that's wrong, right? Mm-hmm. But yet, of course, everyone will take political sides to this. I'm bringing this point up because if we did look politically, you would typically see more of the people who are Democrats on the left being more for the Black community in this regard. And I think we would see the flip-flop as it relates to the issue that you speak about, which is that more people that are for it are on the right. Mm-hmm. So this is an interesting piece as you look at this, because I would imagine that, does that issue have a challenge with you internally? Because this is the perfect example of two issues that politically are picking on different sides. But I would imagine, and I'm speaking for you here, that your take would probably be the injustice is really where you reside versus where the political angles are going. True?
Yeah. And I think I agree with you that virtually everyone, thank God, acknowledged the injustice of what was done in the murder of George Floyd. I mean, that wouldn't have been the case, by the way, over 100 years ago. Blacks were, and even dozens of years ago, there were public celebrations over the lynchings of Blacks in this country. So that is a form of progress. There's obviously more progress that needs to be made. But, to answer your question, I think that I think we need to stop putting ourselves in political camps and making that our whole worldview. I think that's really destructive. And I think we should be critical of policies on both sides. And we should also be mindful of media optics, because I think that there's a lot of, narratives that are presented by media groups, and we should look at the biases of those media groups. And we should weigh whether or not the way that they paint their opponent politically is fair. People are not just groups, they're individuals, and we need to look at individuals for who they are and what they think, instead of just identifying them with a party they might have voted for. But I will say, there are the policy positions matter. Of course they matter. I mean, for the fight for life for preborn children, do I want to stop abortions? Yes. Do I want women to get the care they need? Yes. And there are policy solutions to both. And so certainly you have to get into politics with a human rights issue, and you should, but I think you have to be careful with just fully identifying one group as all bad and one group as all good, because that group is made up of individuals with a lot of differing worldviews and perspectives.
Here's the last one I'll hit on these topics, because I don't usually get this serious about all this stuff, but I think this is interesting. You are a young woman, young mother at this point, representing a side that most women, and I state in the United States, most women are on the opposite side of your opinion on this, as there are more that feel that they have the right to choose than versus the right to life. I'm not giving the exact statistics, but I'm fairly certain I know I've seen this before. How have you personally dealt with, or have you confronted certain challenges when that does happen? Because it is more surprising to another woman when they hear a woman have the point of view that you do, versus maybe a man interjected into this conversation. How's that affected you personally?
Well, I think it depends on which women you talk to. I mean, again, I think the presentation of the media's perspective on what women think collectively on abortion can be very misleading. I know, hundreds and hundreds of women personally, and statistically speaking, there are millions of women in the United States who are as passionate about pro-life and the rights of the child, and that not being in opposition to the rights of the mother as I am. So there's plenty of other women out there like me. We just maybe don't hear about them or see them a lot in sort of media. Typically, you look at like the celebrities or the news makers and you think that they represent America, but that's not always the case. And I could talk a lot about why I think that is and why those biases exist and why that's sort of institutionalized right now in our country. A lot of it has to do with money. And ideology that is propped up by that money. The Planned Parenthood today, I don't know if you're familiar, Planned Parenthood's the biggest abortion chain, but they are the biggest lobbying group for abortion. And they kind of have the branding as like, it's for women, pro women. And I'm really offended by that as a woman, because I think it's actually against me as a woman, and taking the life of my child is never going to get me forward. It only is going to be maybe a short-term relief for someone facing difficult moments in her life, but long-term, it's a trauma, and we don't talk about that enough, I think, as a society. So yeah, I think it depends on what women you're talking to, Lou. And I appreciate you talking to a woman that maybe you think is a unicorn because you don't talk to a lot of women like me, but that's good. There's a lot of diversity of opinion in this country, and I think that's healthy. And I think that if you look at the statistics, it's about half and half consider themselves pro-life or pro-choice women in this country. So it's actually not, as you say, this large majority of women are for abortion, or that's statistically not what it bears out to be, even though it might look like that if you just look at typical news media or you look at entertainment media.
You wrote a book. You're an author. What was
Yes,
the process?
sir.
What was the process like for writing it for you? Sometimes, was it a labor of love? I'm looking at the timing that this book came out. It might have been a labor of love because your kid was born not too far of it. Talk about putting the book together, what that process was like for you, the author.
Yes. Well, in a way, it took having a baby to slow me down from like my travel schedule and everything else to like really, they say you nest when you have a child, or just the nesting instinct. And it gave me a lot of time to really contemplate. And I'd been thinking about writing a book for a long time, but I felt like writing a book that was part guidebook, like a how-to for others, how to fight against injustice, and a book that was a lot of memoir, so a lot of personal stories. Writing a book like that when you're 20s, I felt a little disqualifying. I'm not saying that no 20-year-old or 25-year-old could, but I was like, I want experience. I want to be able to provide something of real value. And so I hit my early 30s. I'm married. I'm having my first baby. A pandemic hits, and it's like, okay, now's the time to bunker down and write this book, because I just, there were so many times in the last 15 years of activism and building my nonprofit to a global organization now, and all of the controversies associated with it and the obstacles. And there were so many times when people would ask me, how'd you do it, or how are you doing it? And they'd ask for help or guidance or input from me for what I've learned. And I'm still learning. It's not like I'm an expert on all these things. I'm a work in progress myself, but I realized that I've been given the gift of a lot of unique experiences in political work and cultural work, and interviewing hundreds of women and hundreds of people who used to work in abortion clinics, and just all this diverse experience, that I had a lot to say. And so, slow down, pandemic hits, finishing up the manuscript finally. And yeah, I gave birth to a book. And I actually will say, birth, labor, this is I don't know if you ever talk about birth stories on your podcast, Lou, but I will say
we're going there, Lila. I want to hear it.
We're about to go there, because giving birth to my son was no easy feat, and it just made me that much more in awe of women and their superpower that makes them mothers, that can make them mothers. But writing this book was even more difficult, I think, like psychologically and in some ways emotionally, because I was like pouring out every last dreg. I mean, I got really raw in the book. I shared some of my biggest struggles personally and biggest obstacles, and really tried to, wrest the lessons that would be useful for people. So, giving birth is hard, but writing a book, I guess not all authors are this way, but for me, it was a labor. It was a long labor, but I'm glad
you're not alone. I'm glad you got to feel for it. At least you felt it's good to feel a little pain every now and then.
Oh, it's a lot of pain writing that book, but fighting
not
for life
as bad as giving birth.
It's out now.
Yeah. You are a podcast host. Now that you're sitting on the other side of the microphone with me, talk to me what it's meant to host your program, and the gift of sitting in the seat that you're in when you're putting that program together?
I mean, I love podcasting. I'm sure you do too. And getting to talk to just really fascinating people. A lot of the people I interview are relationship or health experts, and we talk a lot about mental health and dating and relationships and things like that. So it's a real passion of mine, and I feel like this is like a new form of human connection, the podcast world, that has really transformed even conversations. And we were talking about politics earlier. And I love what a lot of podcasting can do to cut through some of the political partisanship and open minds more to understand both sides, but then also show that we're not just one side or the other. There's a lot more complexity to people's opinions. So, because there's kind of an unfiltered aspect, right, to podcasts that you don't typically get for like 3-minute news clip on, CBS News or something. So anyways, I love it. I can tell you like it too. And
Well,
it's nice to not be coming up with the question. So
yeah, it's conversations are powerful and also really important. And I think this might bring this full circle is the power of having a conversation and talking about an issue versus shouting it at somebody or just, catering someone to vote for an issue because that's what you say. It's the conversation that solves the problem. This goes back several years back. I think Oprah did this where she went in and she spoke to all these people in Michigan from 2 different political sides who might have voted differently in the 2016 election. And then they showed how divided they were going into the room and then just had a conversation and realized how much closer all those people were at the end of just that simple conversation. They bring us together. And I think what podcasts enable us to do is isolate that moment of a conversation and just take it like a tasting menu, right? You get to try something and like, that's really good. Maybe it doesn't go with this, or maybe it doesn't go with that, but it gives you a chance to appreciate something in the moment. And I think that's probably what you probably love. I love the range of topics that you cover there, which has got to be a lot of fun. Is there one interview or one show that still sticks out in your mind that over the others? I'm sure they're all amazing and memorable, but one that you go, that one always gets me.
Well, there was one that I did with a friend of mine who was the lead actress in the movie Unplanned, Ashley Bratcher, which, by the way, if you're listening and you've heard of it but you haven't seen it yet or you haven't heard of it yet, check it out. It's called Unplanned. It's the story actually of a former Planned Parenthood of the Year employee. She was very high up at Planned Parenthood, very well renowned, I guess you could say. And she ended up leaving her clinic and becoming a pro-life activist. So it's her journey and why she did that. She's also a friend of mine, but Ashley was the lead actress playing Abby in the movie. Anyways, but Ashley struggles with bipolar disorder, which she's very public about. And so we tackled that conversation in the podcast, and she shared her perspective on being a working actress with bipolar and her experience of that, and how there's a lot of misconceptions about bipolar disorder and the treatment for it, and how you can be a supportive friend, family, loved one of someone who struggles with bipolar or really any mental health disorder. I've struggled with depression over the years, so we were talking about that. So I really love those conversations because I feel like the mental health conversation is usually either not had, or when it is had, I do think there's still stigma or just ways that it's handled that are less than ideal. And so I love talking to someone who's going through it themselves, who is in many ways an expert in all the work they've done, and who can just share a lot of clarity and hope for other people, because it's really, mental health issues are really everywhere, whether people realize it or not, or they admit it or not. And I think talking about it more and shedding clarity is so powerful to set people free and to remove stigma and to help people heal.
Like it. Lila, 2 more things before we get to the admin and the fun part of the program, even though we've been having fun from the very beginning. Lila, you're a mom for now about a year, right? You have a 1-year-old, correct?
Mm-hmm. You got it. Well, before I was a mom before he was born.
That is true.
So, that counted too. So almost 2 years.
the moments of what I love to call wow in being a mom. What are the things that get you about son or daughter? I don't know. What do you have? A son.
He's a little boy. Yeah.
What is the little boy? What's the thing that gets you? The one thing that you see him do, you're like, oh, no matter what pain he's causing you on that particular day, but the thing that gets you, that makes you smile.
I mean, the older he gets, I feel the more affectionate he gets. And lately he just says, mom, mom. And he just grabs my face and snuggles his face against mine. And I mean, there's nothing more heart melting than a little child. And I agree, like there's crazy moments and hard moments, but yeah, I mean, I feel like daily there's a heart melt moment, and my life has dramatically changed being a mom, but it's dramatically better because of him.
Awesome. Lila, I love asking guests this question. Very curious to see where this one goes. We are all having days when we're kicking on all cylinders, like you. You've got your book, you've got your program, you've got your show, you've got your little boy. So on those days, you are thriving. Yet we all have days when we're not quite kicking on all cylinders. Lila, on those days when you're a little off your game or you're not quite thriving, what practice do you seek or individual do you seek out to get yourself back on the thriving track?
It's a great question. I have a few go-tos. I mean, a hot shower can really set me straight. Just like, even if I already had one, it's like, go take a shower and just like press the reset button. I think talking to God or like texting a friend who, is basically can pray for me or be like, in a way, God for me in that moment and remind me who I am or what I'm going through. Even if just saying like letting out the steam by saying, having a rough morning, whether it's my husband or a friend or just like a prayer in that moment, I think that also helps. But physically, I feel for me, also that reset button of the shower is like a go-to. It's like it's like a start over moment.
I can't wake up unless I have a shower. That's my cup of coffee. My wife needs the cup of coffee. I need the shower. It's like, I'm not up until that goes on. It's like the day hasn't started.
Exactly.
Let's do the
coffee
admin
helps
part.
Too.
Both together. A coffee in the shower would totally help. Yeah. Let's do the admin part of the show. Share with the listeners all the places people can find you, websites, social media links, stuff about the book.
You got it.
We will put it on the show notes, but gets more engagement when they hear it from you.
So Fighting for Life, Becoming a Force for Change in a Wounded World. It's a guidebook. It's a storybook. It's basically how to make a difference in a world, especially on controversial issues. That is everywhere you find books. So Barnes & Noble, Amazon, whatever. It's Fighting for Life. My podcast is the Lila Rose Show. Check it out. Relationships, health, culture, some politics, stuff like that. And then liveaction.org is my website for my organization, Live Action. Lots of resources and educational stuff there on pro-life and other related issues. And then for socials, I'm Lila Rose Official or Lila Grace Rose, however it is on Twitter, Instagram, or wherever. And if you like TikTok, I'm not really active on TikTok myself, but my organization is, and it's liveaction.org.
Spectacular. Lila, you ready to go down Fun Street with me?
Sure. It's a little crazy sounding, but let's do it.
It's Fun Street. It
better be actually fun, okay?
Oh, this is no doubt fun for you. Okay, first of all, can you share with the listeners I know you had trouble with this, one or a certain movie that kind of is one that you'd love to rewatch over and over again because you like it so much?
So the first thing that comes to mind is I'm half Italian, and that's like an important part of my heritage, I feel. And I just love The Godfather. I know that's 3 movies, but I just think it's kind of epic. And I think there's some stereotype issues with it, but overall it was just epic filmmaking and storytelling. So I like The Godfather. But I don't say that's my favorite movie of all time. It's just a favorite.
A favorite movie. I got that. We made that clear. But for listeners need to know, she has too many that we would be able to put into one bucket, but no problem. You can't go wrong. Godfather's a classic. I happen to like 2 over 1, but you can't live with one without the other. All right, we're going to do the speed round here, Lila. I know you can handle it. You are a pro. This is real easy. I'm going to ask you something. I want the first thing that comes to your mind. Most of these things lift you up, make you feel good, motivate you, basically make you thrive. First thing that comes to your mind. Don't have to think too much about it. Okay, ready?
Ready.
A song that is right now your jam or one that pumps you up.
So I love The Greatest by Sia. But the song I sing to my son is Jesus Loves You. I say Jesus Loves You instead of Jesus Loves Me. But I like The Greatest by Sia and Jesus Loves Me.
A favorite food that's not a dessert.
I like avocado.
A favorite dessert?
Good, healthy ice cream.
Ice cream. Not ice cream, avocado ice cream. I got that.
No, not avocado ice cream.
Definitely not. And if they come up with that, please don't. Who's ever listening?
There's a thing, actually. It's like an avocado-based ice cream. I don't like it. Not good. Not my thing.
But we love avocados on its own, and we love ice cream. I love it. What flavor ice cream?
I like cookies and cream.
Ooh, okay. An activity you wish you did more of?
Jogging. I mean, I used to jog when I was single and young. Now I'm busy and a mom, and I feel like I don't do that. I didn't really even like jogging. It was so good for me, and I know it is, but I'm not really in that zone yet right now. So getting back into it would be great to help me thrive, as you say.
An activity you wish you did less of?
I mean, sit in front of my computer like I'm doing now. Be outside more and not be sitting here. Not that I don't like this interview, but
I was about to say, like, she does not want to be on
chair.
Thrive Loud. That's what I'm hearing. No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. I understand. We've all had a little bit too much screen time. If I snap my fingers anywhere, Lila, if I snap my fingers and you can be anywhere in the world, where are you?
I'd pick somewhere in Italy
Okay.
with my family.
Have you been?
Yes, many times. I love it.
And
I'm working on my Italian citizenship, actually.
Really? That's awesome. What's your favorite part of Italy when you're there? Like, is it one that sticks out?
I mean, Rome is my go-to because it's like a spiritual home for me, but I also love the coast. I love the Amalfi Coast. I love Capri area and Naples. So it's all great. It's hard to pick a favorite for different reasons. It's great.
Lila Rose, Fighting for Life. Thank you so much for coming on Thrive Loud today.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Lou.
And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Check us out on the web at thriveloud.com and follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook at Thrive Loud. And check us out on the Good Pods app at Thrive Loud, where you can follow, listen, and connect directly to Lou and all of the Thrive Loud episodes. Thanks for listening.